What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video on the channel, and I know I am kind of late to this, but I do want to give my preview and prediction for the 2024 NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics, which tip off tomorrow. I'm recording this video on Wednesday, the night before. The finals start tomorrow on Thursday, so I want to give my series preview, who I think is going to win. But first, let's just start off with how these two teams got to the finals. So you have the Western champion Dallas Mavericks, the 5th seed. Not many people expected them to make it all the way to the finals. I predicted them to make it all the way to the conference finals, so I saw a deep playoff run coming for Luca and Kyrie. I just thought I liked the way they were playing this year, and I liked them to get to the conference finals, but eventually lose to the Nuggets. But they beat the Clippers in the first round, a team that was looking like one of the best teams in the league for a majority of the season. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were healthy. They were playing. They got the James Harden situation figured out. Russell Westbrook was playing great off the bench. But then towards the end of the season, they just didn't look like the same team. And we saw that come into fruition in the postseason when they lost in 6 games to the Dallas Mavericks. And then they go on to the second round, the Mavs do, that is, and beat the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, the Oklahoma City Thunder. A very good team led by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, as most of you guys know, I thought should have been the MVP of the league this year. Shai was my MVP pick for what he did in the regular season. But they beat Oklahoma City in 6. That was a very tough series. But then they move on to the Western Conference Finals to take on the Minnesota Timberwolves, who, after beating the Denver Nuggets in the second round in a thrilling 7-game series, a lot of people, including myself, thought that they were going to win the title. I thought that after they beat Denver, they were the team to beat because they beat Nikola Jokic, who in many people's eyes is the best player in the world. And then they go on to the conference finals and they're playing the Dallas Mavericks, a team that people don't think is as good as the Nuggets. But then the Mavericks roll in, they steal the first 2 games at home. Luca and Kyrie go absolutely crazy. Game 2 was one of the more pivotal games of the series because the Timberwolves blew an 18-point lead at home, and Luka Doncic hit a game winner on Rudy Gobert, and that had a lot of people questioning Rudy Gobert's validity as Defensive Player of the Year, whether or not he should have 4 of those awards. And then they split the 2 games at home. They go up 3-0, and Minnesota gets Game 4. They don't want to get swept, so they get 1 game. And then they come out in Game 5 and just annihilate Minnesota. The game was over at halftime. I think the deficit at halftime was 36 points. So the game was over at halftime. The Wolves never stood a chance. And the Mavs throughout the series looked like the better team. They were just so much better in the clutch. Minnesota did not know how to close, and Dallas had arguably the 2 best closers in the NBA with Luka and Kyrie on the same team. And once they got that duo figured out, getting them to play good at the same time, you knew they were going to be an unstoppable team in crunch time, and that's exactly what they were against the Timberwolves. And so they move on to the finals. But then the Celtics, it was a little different path, a very, some people would say, much easier path, one of the easier paths to the finals we've seen in a while. So they draw Miami in the first round, no Jimmy Butler, no Terry Rozier. They take care of the Heat in 5, and then they take on the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round without Jared Allen for the entire series, and then without Donovan Mitchell for games 4 and 5 of the series. Mitchell played game 3 and the first 2 games, but he didn't play the final 2 games of the series. And so they handle Cleveland in 5, which they should. They're beating the teams they're supposed to beat in relatively quick fashion. Although the concern that many people have for the Celtics is dropping games at home, because they lost game 2 to Miami at home and game 2 to Cleveland at home. 2 games that they really shouldn't have lost. And in the loss to Miami, I think the Heat made 23 3-pointers. But then they took on Indiana in the conference finals, and it was kind of the same thing because the Pacers were a 6th seed, but they gave it their all that entire series. You could argue that 3 out of the 4 games that Indiana lost, take out game 2, the Pacers should have won those games, because when you look at game 1, all they had to do was inbound the basketball, and they would have stolen game 1 on the road in TD Garden. But then Jaylen Brown goes ballistic in game 2, scores 40 points, and Tyrese Halliburton injures his hamstring, and from then on it's pretty much over. But then the series shifts to Indiana for games 3 and 4, and the Pacers come out and play really well. The Pacers come out to an 18-point lead in game 3, and then in game 4, the Celtics and the Pacers were going down to the wire, nip and tuck. Indiana was up 9 with a few minutes to go, but they couldn't close, and so the Celtics advanced to the NBA Finals. And you have the Celtics and the Mavs. I think this is going to be a very great finals when you look at just the storylines between these two teams. So the Celtics, obviously, they've been knocking on the door for so long trying to get another NBA title. They've been to the Eastern Conference Finals 5 times since Jason Tatum has been on the team, but they haven't been able to capture that elusive NBA championship. And as we all know, they went to the finals in 2022 against the Golden State Warriors and weren't able to get it done, lost in 6 games. And so this is a redemption for Jason Tatum and the Celtics, because that squad is mostly the same. Like, outside of Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, those new additions, Marcus Smart isn't on the team anymore. Grant Williams isn't on the team anymore, obviously, but a lot of those guys were on the team when they went on that finals run in 2022. So a lot of guys, in particular Jason Tatum, are looking to redeem themselves in this series. And then, obviously, the storyline that everybody is talking about, Kyrie Irving coming back to Boston after what many people consider to be a disappointing tenure with the team. He wanted to go there to be the number 1 option. He thought he could be a number 1 on a championship team without LeBron James, and that proved to not be the case. And then there was the whole incident before the start of the 2018-2019 regular season where he basically promised Celtics fans that he was going to re-sign with the team. But then the Celtics ended up being a very disappointing team that year. They finished 4th in the East despite having what a lot of people consider to be the most talented roster in the conference. Maybe the most talented roster in the league outside of the Golden State Warriors, because obviously the Warriors with Steph, Clay, Draymond, and Kevin Durant, nobody was going to out-talent those Warriors teams because they were just too good. But outside of Golden State, from top to bottom, the Celtics definitely had the most talented roster in the East that year, and they weren't able to get it done. And a lot of people blame that on Kyrie Irving, his inability to be a leader. Well, not inability, but at the time, he wasn't showing the ability to be a leader that the number 1 option on a championship team needs to be. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both regressed a lot from what they were doing in the 2018 playoffs when they went on that run to the conference finals with no Kyrie Irving and no Gordon Hayward. Both of those guys regressed. And a lot of people blame that on Kyrie Irving and Hayward because they integrated them back into the lineup. You saw a guy like Terry Rozier, who became Boston's starting point guard. He was flourishing in those playoffs, but then when Kyrie Irving came back, he wasn't playing the same. And then when Gordon Hayward was taking Jason Tatum's minutes, his development kind of stalled a little bit. So there was a lot going on in Boston that year that just wasn't working out. And then Kyrie Irving ended up leaving the Celtics, declining his player option, and then going to Brooklyn. And pretty much ever since then, Celtics fans have hated Kyrie Irving. Like, that's pretty, it's kind of an exaggeration, but it's also not. The Celtics fans do not like Kyrie Irving. Every time Kyrie plays in the TD Garden, they boo him every single time he touches the ball. He probably gets more boos than any player in the league right now going into an opposing arena. I don't think it's close. I don't think any team boos an opposing player like Celtics fans do Kyrie Irving right now. And especially if Dallas is able to win this series, I'm sure that hate is just going to grow even more because they do not want to see him succeed. But then the other sort of rivalry in this series, mini-rivalry, is Kristaps Porzingis, because he used to play for the Mavericks. And before the Mavericks got Kyrie Irving, people thought that Luca and Kristaps Porzingis were going to be that duo that Luca and Kyrie are right now, just dominating the league, because you have a guy in Porzingis who's 7'3", can score from virtually anywhere, is a terrific shot blocker, great two-way player when he's healthy. And so he leaves Dallas. It gets kind of ugly. There's a lot of rumors about his relationship with Luka Doncic. Was it good? Was it bad? And throughout the media availability so far for these teams, they're obviously downplaying it and saying, there was nothing wrong with us, it just didn't work out, we're great friends off the court. Now, you expect them to say that, but you could also believe that it just wasn't a good fit. And so Kristaps Porzingis goes to Washington, doesn't really do anything there, puts up good numbers, but the Wizards obviously aren't winning any games. And so then he goes to Boston and then just takes the Celtics to a whole nother level, because 64 wins in the regular season, and they cruise through the Eastern Conference playoffs, even though he wasn't available for a majority of that run with a right calf strain. And so he's going to be playing in the finals, and so there's a lot of mini rivalry matchups going on right now. The Mavericks are trying to get their first title since 2011, since Dirk went on that improbable run, beating the Lakers, beating the Thunder, all those teams, Miami in the NBA Finals that year. And so it's going to be a really, really good finals. And in terms of my prediction, I'll make this short. I think that the Mavericks are going to pull it off. I have the Mavericks pulling off the upset. On paper, Boston is definitely the better team. But usually in the finals, I'm going to lean on the shoulders of the best player. I think the Mavericks definitely have the best player in the series. and Luka Doncic, and I trust their ability to close in tight games because I've seen them do it against better competition in the playoffs. I'm sorry, I know you have to legitimize any run to the NBA Finals because it's too hard not to. You can't say that any run to the NBA Finals was easy because it's just disrespectful to the teams that make it. But the Celtics had a very, very easy run to the NBA Finals compared to the Mavs. You look at who they played in the first round. No Jimmy Butler, no Terry Rozier, no Donovan Mitchell or Jared Allen in the second round. Halliburton injured in the conference finals. And they were still struggling to win some of these games. They dropped game 2 to Cleveland at home, and then they were in nip and tuck games with the Cavs in game 5, I believe, and then in game 4 as well. Marcus Morris turned back the clock and scored 20 points in game 5, and that dude has been sort of Mr. DNP the entire season. And so when I look at what they did in the conference finals in terms of struggling to beat the Pacers, yes, they have that experience that the Mavs do in winning close games, but I've seen the Mavs do it against greater competition. So I'm going to lean on the shoulders of them, not on the shoulders, but I'm going to lean on them to win the finals more than I do the Celtics. I just trust the Mavs more on the biggest stage because I think Kyrie Irving, a guy who's won a championship before, and I don't think Luka Doncic is going to be afraid of the moment. This guy's been playing professional basketball since he was 15 years old, so I think he will be ready. But I would not be surprised if the Celtics won because, like I said, I do think Boston is the better team on paper. You have a guy in Jason Tatum who's really just, I think, really been unfairly covered throughout these playoffs. Like, sure, he may not be as good as people think. Some people think he is like a top 5 player, but all the press and headlines surrounding Jason Tatum is pretty much all negative, and I don't think that he deserves that because every time I turn, the question about Jason Tatum is, oh, is he overrated? Can he be the number 1 on a championship team? Things like that. And I mean, the dude just averaged 30 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists in the conference finals. So he's going to be ready to go. It's just a matter of me trusting Luca and Kyrie more than I do the Celtics collectively because I do think history has shown that Boston's offense does stall out in the playoffs. Maybe this is the year it doesn't happen, but the system that they run of just shooting a bunch of threes and then ISO ball when the game gets tight, I just don't really trust them to get it done against a team in the Mavs who have been more battle-tested. I think you can't argue that the Mavs have been more battle-tested throughout these playoffs, and I think that's also something that factors into my decision in picking the Dallas Mavericks. I do think, I'm glad that these teams, for the most part, are healthy. The Celtics are getting Porzingis back, so that definitely changes things in terms of pick-and-roll defense. They're going to be able to defend that Luka and Kyrie pick-and-roll better. The Mavs got Maxi Kleber back at the tail end of the conference finals, so both of these teams are healthy, well rested, over a week off for both of them because they took care of their opponents in the conference finals with relative ease. So I'm going to be excited to watch a series where both of these teams are well rested, healthy, and ready to go. May the best team win. I'm going to go Mavs in 6 or 7. Mavs in 7 is my official prediction. I think the Mavericks win in 7 games. Let me know what you guys think about the NBA Finals. Let me know who you guys think is the better team in this series. Who's the best player in this series? I think it's clearly Luka Doncic, but if you want to argue Jason Tatum, go ahead. Thank you for watching this video, as always, and make sure to like, comment, share, and find the rest of my content linked in the description.